Hello everyone, you're listening to The Earful Tower, a podcast about Paris, and there's a bit of a spring in my step and there's a number of reasons for it. First, there's an interesting episode coming up with Emma Jacobs, who's just written and illustrated a fantastic book about the smaller museums of Paris, but also there's a new sponsor on the show. It's thanks to them that I'm doing 2 episodes a week, so if you like this show, I guess you can be doubly glad to know that it's going to be popping into your phone Mondays and Thursdays from now on, for Season 6, that is. And the sponsor is Fat Tire Tours. Now, the idea is I'm going to do a lot of their tours, which are on bicycles, segways, walking tours, cruises, Eiffel Tower, that kind of stuff. And at the end of the Thursday episode, I'm going to tell you about the tour that I did. And they, in return, are going to also offer you guys a 10% discount off their tours of like 10 cities around the world. So I'll explain that at the end of the episode. But if you're in a hurry, you just use the word earful as a coupon code at the checkout. 10% off. Done. So I'll talk to you more about Fat Tire Tours at the end of the episode. But first, let's get into it. It's a topic, museums, which I've covered sort of briefly before. You might remember that me and my wife went to as many museums as we could in 4 days last season. And that was a lot of the big ones. We went to the Musée d'Orsay and the Louvre. But this episode is specifically about smaller museums, and Emma's picked 6 of her favorite of the small museums. So have a listen, get some inspiration, and if you want to see the lovely watercolors that she's done about these museums, go and buy a book or get a taste of it on the earfultower.com very soon. But one more sort of word of advice. Some of the museum names of these smaller museums, like they're all French, and so you maybe haven't heard of them before. Like you probably know how to spell the Louvre or to search for it, but several of the ones that Emma suggests here are very hard to remember. So I've written them in the show notes. If you don't know what the show notes are, it's where you sort of scroll down on whatever, on Apple Podcasts or Android or wherever you're looking, scroll down, you'll see that I've written them as well as the address. So they're all there right now, and they'll be on the earfultower.com very soon. But let's do it. Season 6. It's the 6th Republic of the Eiffel Tower. Episode 2, we have got Emma Jacobs talking about the littler museums of Paris. Let's get into it. Emma Jacobs, welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much.
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm a little jet lagged. I just got into Paris yesterday.
Did you have your coffee in the end?
I did, yes.
I just remembered that I bought a coffee and it's been sitting there this whole pre-conversation. Do you need another one? We could share it if you want.
No, I'm okay.
Okay,
Go for it, though.
Let's talk a little bit about, firstly about you, before we even touch the base of museums and stuff. Because I tried to guess your accent. I was kind of wrong. Let's hear a little bit about where you're from.
So I'm mostly from the States. My mother's Canadian, and I live in Canada now.
Right.
And I've been told for a long time, it doesn't really make any sense, but apparently I sound kind of Ontario.
You sound Ontario.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know, certain vowels apparently.
Right. And in Montreal, do you? I'm really fascinated by the whole French English thing over there.
It's wonderful. I love it.
What's the deal with that? Like
it's
everything
just very
is
fluid. And a lot of people are really good in both languages. So you'll be on the bus or whatever, and people are switching between languages within a conversation.
That's so cool.
Or within a sentence. And then also one thing I really love hearing, which you do hear occasionally, is like one person will be a little more comfortable in English and the other will be a little more comfortable in French.
Yeah.
And so one person will be speaking English and the other person will be responding in French.
Isn't that weird?
It's wonderful.
I love that.
I love it.
I love that. Do you do that? Do you speak French?
Yes. And I do cheat probably more in Montreal, where if there's a word I can't come up with, I'll just say it.
Well, that's the ultimate way to advance in a language, is when you can get away with just using the English word. In terms
I actually think it's the reverse, because I feel like then you don't learn the vocabulary.
Yeah, well, it's the ultimate way to getting fluid or fluent in the language, as in that you can talk quickly. So,
it's helpful. Yeah,
so if you don't know the word for umbrella, you say like blah, 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 umbrella, blah, 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 and you get on with it. Yeah, but you're right. It's not going to win you any awards except for most comfortable speaker.
Well, and also I think that, there are a lot of French folks in Montreal, and I sometimes wonder if I do it too much and they're not understanding everything I say, because their English tends to be, not quite Quebecer English.
And have you noticed when you speak French in France that people sort of go, what kind of French is that?
Oh, well, you know what? I learned most of my French in France, so it's actually the reverse.
Okay.
People in Quebec tend to have trouble placing me.
Yeah, okay. They think you're some American French
Well, I mean, they notice my accent's French, and then sometimes it'll be like, "Are you German? Like,
Really?
what is the accent?" And I was getting that a little bit in France towards the end.
I love accents, and I could talk about it all day, but we're here to talk about museums.
Yes,
which is
it's
something that you're probably more prepared for than my
I mean,
interrogation.
I walk around Quebec all the time, and I'm just like analyzing the way they talk all the time.
Yeah.
So
It'd spin my head, I reckon. But anyway, museums.
Yes.
Would it be fair to say you're obsessed with small museums?
Yeah, that's probably true.
So I will have already introduced you and everything, but your book, The Littler Museums of Paris, what was it that drew you to the little ones? What's wrong with the Louvre?
I just think the little ones are more, they've got more atmosphere. They're sort of really unique experiences and kind of immersive, and a lot of them are, laid out still in a certain period in the past, and so you can walk in and it's just you feel like you're walking into a totally foreign environment.
Right. Especially when they're like the people's homes.
Exactly, yeah. There's a lot of house museums in particular.
Yeah. And so what I've asked you to do, and I haven't seen your list at all, but I asked you to come in with 6, how did we decide 6 museums?
Yes.
That, did we say the best or your favorite or?
I actually was thinking in honor of doing this on audio, I was going to talk about the most visually interesting.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's great. I love it. Okay, so the most visually interesting small museum, because would you say it's fair that the Musée d'Orsay or the Musée du Louvre is the most visually interesting?
I mean, I love Orsay. I haven't been to the Louvre in like 12 years or something.
Right.
I don't love it. I just feel like there's a gazillion people, and it doesn't feel like you have time to breathe there, and
Sure.
it doesn't. It is beautiful, but Orsay, I think, is just really magical because of that sort of juxtaposition of the old train station and the art, and it just, again, it's sort of weird and unique.
Yeah. I met the managing director of the Musée d'Orsay the other day, and when you meet someone, it's much easier to ask them to be on a podcast, right, than when it's on, back and forth thing with email. And we got talking. I said I'd really like to do an interview with him inside the clock that looks out over the city.
That would be great.
So I said it'd be great to do an interview with you after the museum's closed inside that clock, like really romantic or something.
Did he say yes?
He said, "Yeah, let's do
wonderful.
it." So that's something to. Is there anything you think I should ask him?
They have a really wonderful. I don't know if he's privy to it all, but they have a great kids podcast, and it's really fun, and it's a really. They do it as little stories that are inspired by the museum, and it's sound rich,
Wow.
and it's cute.
In French.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
And I just think it's amazing, and I wonder where the idea came from.
Okay, I'll put that in there for you as a question from Emma Jacobs. But going down to smaller museums, shall we start with one from your list, and you can walk me through it, and then we'll get on with the conversation? Okay, go on then.
So the Museum of Hunting and Nature, or Chasse et la Nature, is I think one of just the most unique Paris kind of. It merges the house museum with about 10 years ago, I want to say. They did a renovation, and they sort of rethought it and made it this very whimsical kind of place where there's modern art integrated with the old collection, which is a lot of taxidermy and old oil paintings.
Yeah. And people who would think, hunting's not for me, would you still say get in there and check it out?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is they've created this environment that's not, it's kind of about the hunting in nature, but a lot of it is just about creating this environment that you're walking through, where you'll have like the fox curled up in the chair, right?
Yeah. You know what, that museum, I think there are a handful of museums in Paris with names that aren't very appealing, you know? Like Chasse, what is it? Musée de la Chasse et de la Nature or something?
Yeah.
Like I think people would go, meh.
And I spoke to the director, and he said, at this point, so they've had this really dramatic growth in visitorship since he did that. Well, he came in and said, I want to make it more accessible and a more general audience. And I think had to push against the organization a little bit
so
to do that.
His renovation 10 years ago was the sort of catalyst for, yeah?
Yeah. But so their visitorship has been going up a lot. And he said to me he thinks it's mostly word of mouth. He thinks that's how people find out about it.
Right. That's so cool. And what I love about your book is that it's not just... it's quite interactive. You've talked to the people at these museums and you've got their story in quite a small number of words as well. You know what I mean? I thought that was really cool. Like you talked to the people and captured the essence of them and their museum. That's great.
Thanks. I mean, that's sort of my reporter.
The reporter
hat.
background.
Yeah.
It was neat. I thought it was cool. It shows that, I mean, for one thing, it shows that you were there and doing it and that you love it. And it's beyond just, going online and writing that kind of thing. But tell me before we get on to another museum, let's explain this idea of smaller museums of Paris and the idea that a lot of people who come here probably don't have them on their to-do list. Do you think that's a grave error?
Yes. I got into Charles de Gaulle yesterday, and I was at the RER station that leaves the airport, and there was some guy there, and he was asking directions to the Eiffel Tower.
What do you mean, like a tourist or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was his plan. He was going to go straight to the Eiffel Tower, like straight to the big spots, and they don't necessarily do a whole lot for me. And also, I think they are just the itinerary that people do. People go from the Eiffel Tower to the Louvre, back to their hotel, and they don't get to a whole lot more. And I think that's such a huge mistake because they are really special and unique places, but a lot of what is also really unique and fun to do in the city is stuff like these small museums. And the landscape of small museums in Paris is really unlike, I don't know, almost any city I can think of.
Right.
So there's a little more than 200 in the greater Paris region.
200 museums or smaller museums?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
right.
no, sorry, museums total.
Right.
And that's not just in Paris proper, but in the surrounding.
Yeah, I think it's weird that so many people, I mean, I understand as well that you want to go to the Louvre, there's so many cool things there, but I think it's weird that people aren't more interested in avoiding the crowds, Like it's kind of what you said, 10 minutes ago, is that there's just a gazillion, you said, people are at the Louvre, which is probably the scientific phrase for how many people are there every day. But like I was in Montmartre the other day with some family friends were visiting, and it was like Saturday afternoon, going through the Place du Tertre and the Sacré-Cœur, and I was like, this is horrible. There are just too many people here, Like it's kind of like the secret's out. Everybody knows, and I think it's almost should be on people's to-do list to find the smaller places. Like
in some ways, I feel like I'm sort of spoiling some of my secrets.
But that's cool. Then in 10 years, you write another book about the little or something else.
And send them all there.
Yeah. Just stay ahead of the crowd. That's cool. But let's go on to number 2 from your list.
So the Musée Nissim de Camondo is actually a sort of annex of art décoratif, and it is another house museum. The building was built in 1911, but it was built to match the collector's 18th century furniture collection.
Right.
And it's probably one of the places that feels most like a time machine. That it's just, the look is so complete. And there's really interesting color. The furniture is, all amazing, but there's just the color and I think you are feeling a little bit of the modern feel in there, even with the 18th century.
Yeah, and that's not such a popular one either, is it?
I think when you go in there, you hear a lot of French.
Right.
And it's hard for me to say if they're French tourists from elsewhere or from France.
Sure. Yeah. Or from Quebec.
Possible.
Who knows?
I think I can hear that at this
point.
But
that museum is really highly rated on TripAdvisor.
It's an amazing place, and it's where I've taken people, who are only going to go to one small museum.
Right. So would that be? That's you kind of, if you have to do one small museum. Well, no one has to, but if you wanted to do one small one, would that be the one that you'd point them to?
Probably, and maybe Chasse et la Nature, but I feel like in some ways that one's so unique that it doesn't necessarily give you a feel for the wider landscape of them.
I remember I went there and I just remember thinking, because there's one family that lived there, right? I think it's the family of bankers and stuff, is that right? And I just remember thinking, what wealth. It's just unimaginable how... Yeah. It's crazy. It's really interesting to see.
I mean, a lot of these house museums are like that. There was a certain era, which was the second half of the 19th century, that a lot of these people just decided, I'm going to me to collect and turn my home into this museum, but also that they had this sort of, not to give them, there's a lot of ego involved, but also that this is a collection I'm creating for the public and the public good.
Well, yes, because people, were they thinking that they'd make it so that it lived on after they died for the public? Is that
a lot of them in that era in particular, yes.
Right. And Camondo was his name, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nissim de Camondo is actually his son.
Right.
Who died. He was a pilot in World War I.
Right.
And so he created the museum in his memory.
And so what you've done is you've gone to these kind of museums, for example, this one, and you've sketched, I think you sketched one or two of the sort of artifacts there. Sketched? Is the word watercolors? What's the illustrated?
I mean, they're watercolors, and sometimes it's a scene, and sometimes it's just objects.
Yeah. And how did you pick out the objects for which to paint?
At the beginning, I think I was doing the stuff that interested me visually.
Yeah.
And then I think at a certain point I realized it helps to have the narrative in mind first, so you pick the right objects.
Okay, let's get on to the third. We got 6, right? Okay, let's do third and fourth back to back, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how you made the book.
So third is Jacquemart-André, which is another collector. It was a couple, but the wife outlasted the husband by 2 decades.
What's it called? The museum?
Musée Jacquemart-André.
Okay, I've not heard of that one. I don't think.
It's a mansion. It's huge and very, very elegant, and full of interesting furniture and a winter salon and their collection of Italian art.
Wow.
So that one's really fun. And Nélie Jacquemart, the artist, is, fascinating life story that we can't get into.
There you go. There's some, buy the book, guys. The Little Museums of Paris. But where is that one?
It's on the Boulevard Haussmann in, I want to say the 6th.
Right. Yeah. Down elegant, posh people walking around with posh dogs at the end of posh leashes. Yeah, I know the area. That's nice. But how are people meant to find these museums if you don't have your book in front of you?
There's your phone.
What do you mean? So you're going? No. How do you discover it?
No.
Okay. So I'm walking around in Paris. I'm thinking of something to do. You said that this museum that I can't even pronounce is well worth a visit. How am I ever going to discover that? Like, how do people find? Like, what is there a list of museums or?
Well, Jacquemart-André when I went was super empty. I don't think that's always the case. I also don't remember what time of year I went. I think there are other people out there who get the same idea, and they do get to a lot of these small museums. One thing you'll notice, and I think I've seen Jacquemart-André in the metro. You'll see a lot of metrorettes for museums. It's just sort of a unique thing here, and it's not just museums, but there's a lot of cultural advertising in this.
I wonder, I reckon, because so many of these mansions that have turned into museums, there must. How many? Do you know how many there are in Paris?
Of the house museums? No, I don't.
There must be at least, let's say, 10. Right?
Oh, much more than that.
Okay.
Well, you know what else is? A lot of them have figured out that temporary expositions are what get people in. Yeah. And actually, the Jacquemart-André didn't used to have temporary exhibitions, and then they were taken over by a different organization that's running it, and they added them, partly because that's the programming is how you get people to come visit.
I think I don't know, I'm no marketing expert, but I feel like if any of those 20 or 50 or however many they are, whichever one hires the best marketing person, it would be so easy to fill these up. So, I feel like there's just one switch that needs to be flicked to make any, like the Nissim de Camondo is amazing. It is, and if the other one that you just mentioned is anywhere near amazing, like the magic is that they're empty. But I feel like it's just a second away from, from switching that around so that the people who are beyond going straight for the Eiffel Tower from the train station would be like, I've got to get to that house museum.
We'll talk offline about PR in French museums.
Okay, so there's a musée, let's say Jacquemart-André, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try and remember that. But that was number 3, right? So let's get into number 4.
Okay, so number 4 is fast. It's the Musée de Nélie, which is actually also an annex of the larger Musée of Asian Arts, Musée Guimet.
Right.
And Nélie, it's only open for tours on Saturdays.
Okay.
You have to reserve in advance. The tours are in French.
Yeah.
And it's just this little, again, a little tiny private collection arranged as they left it. So there's very little signage.
Cool.
And it's just another one of those places you just walk in.
But if you don't speak
magical.
French, you can still appreciate it?
The day that I went with a friend, the tour guide didn't show up. So they just let us wander around, and we were perfectly happy.
And this one's called, was it Dinare, was it?
Yeah.
So for anyone listening who doesn't speak French, I'm going to have not only will I have all these museum names in the show notes, I'll also do a post on the site with all these and links to the book and everything. So don't stress if you don't understand. I will have it written down. But please continue.
So what were we at? Number 5?
Yeah, let's do 5 and 6, and then we'll just have a right old chat.
Number 5 is the Musée Moreau, which is it's an artist house. So there are a bunch of artist house museums throughout Paris as well. He, towards the end of his life, decided he needed a museum because he felt that you should see all of his work together, and it's one of the first artist house museums, and inspires a lot of others. I think the Rodin may have been before the Moreau, but they're early on, and then a lot of artists decide later.
So they
I would like my own dedicated museum.
I think every artist probably wants their own dedicated museum.
Of course, yeah.
So all you have to do is buy a big house and then just wait till you die, and then.
When he made modifications in advance of
Right.
his death, he created this expanded his atelier on the top floor, and it has this beautiful staircase and a lot of light.
That is the most Instagrammable staircase in Paris, I think.
It is, yes.
The winding,
It's very photographed.
Oh my goodness, and that place is very empty as well. That's another one that.
Yeah.
I guess I went there once, but there was no one there.
I mean, the art is strange, right? Like, one of the things he does is he mixes a lot of biblical religious imagery with, Greek myth.
Yeah, there's unicorns.
It's unusual.
Unicorns and Jesus, isn't it? It's that
Exactly,
kind of stuff.
yeah.
You know what's cool about going to a lot of these museums, I wonder if you found the same thing, is that as you... Because how long did it take you to visit these 50 or so museums that are in the book?
I don't know, because I was doing it over the course of the time I lived here. Like,
Right.
I would do maybe... I think I was trying to do one a week.
Right. So are you like deeply into art or anything, or is it just the museums more?
I think history is kind of more my lens.
Right. So I wonder if you found, as I did, that when you go between lots of different museums, you see each other's their work in other ones. God, I said that badly.
There's a ton of overlap, and you start
overlap.
to
That's better.
put these connections together.
Isn't that? Don't you think that's one of the really rewarding bits? You go, oh
It's
look,
super-
there's a Moreau in the Musée d'Orsay, and just like, oh, everything just starts clicking into place.
Yeah.
It's not so hard after all. It's
And you
kind
start to trace how the artists move around, because the sort of central artistic neighborhood will move around, and you'll realize that as you're going to the different museums over time.
Yeah. So when you say that you're more into the history than the art, do you mean the history of the buildings or the history of the story of the people that are in there?
Some of it's Paris history, some of it is the people.
Right. Okay, we're going to get on to number 6.
So this one is actually one of the suburban museums, and probably the hardest to get to in the book. I'm not even sure. I'm not sure you can
We're talking taxi?
get there by transit. I went with friends, and we rented a car.
Really?
This was the only one that we did this to, and the reason is because it is the sort of country estate that was left by that woman Nélie Jacquemart that I mentioned.
Yeah.
And I was just so curious to see it.
Okay. So what is it? Whereabouts is it?
It was northeast of the city. Maybe there's a way to get there by transit. We can figure this out for the web.
Mm-hmm.
And she had this chateau, and it's on the ruins of, there's I think a 12th century abbey next door, where the one French king who became a saint was there for a while.
Right.
And it's a very unusually laid out place with a lot of juxtapositions of her interests in Asian art, and then Greek sculpture, and then paintings, and medieval. She just kind of jams everything together in a way she finds aesthetically interesting.
Wow.
And also her personal, you go through her personal apartments, and they're they're really neat. And she also was a very early technology adopter, so she had the first telephone in her area, and there used to be an elevator.
Wow, that's great. I like it. I also like that the last one on your list was one that is a bit of a journey to get to, because it always feels more rewarding when you get to the end of the line and find what you're looking for. Don't you think? Okay, that's a great list. So every single one of those ones that you mentioned are in the book, right?
They are, yes.
Okay, so the book is called The Littler Museums, as in little with an R in brackets. Why in brackets?
Because there are some ones that I felt like relative to the Louvre, everything is smaller, but I did put a couple in there just because they were so interesting, like Arts et Métiers.
Oh yeah, right.
That is not house museum sized.
Yeah, and the book is sort of arranged in sort of chapters where it would be, the ones that belong to artists, or the ones that are about
science and medicine.
Mm-hmm. So there you go, guys. The Littler Museums of Paris. It's an illustrated guide to the city's hidden gems by Emma Jacobs, who's in the studio in front of me right now. I wonder if people at home can hear the children screaming like they're being chased by an axe murderer in the playground behind us. If you can, I apologize, but that's Paris for you. But I want to ask you, Emma, what have you got planned for your next book? There's always has to be a next book.
I don't know the answer to that.
Oh, that means you know the answer, but you don't want to reveal it.
No, I learned a lot doing this book, and part of me feels like I'd love to apply that, because there are things I would do differently next time. But cool. I'm not sure what I'm ready to sink that much energy into.
It must have been a mammoth task for you guys at home who aren't flicking through it like I am right now. This is, not just practical information in terms of extreme practical stuff like address and phone number and website, but like I said before, interviews with people that work there, sketches, illustrations, watercolors of things inside the museum. Not to mention that you had to go to 50 museums, which I know is a year's worth of work. It was a
hobby that turned into a book, and that's very helpful.
Yeah. Well done. It's a fantastic book. Good job. And thanks for being in the studio. And good luck with your trip in Paris now and your museum hunting. You're going to do museum hunting, right?
Probably, yeah.
Okay, that sounds about right. Well, thanks for coming in.
Thanks.
Well, there you have it. That was Emma Jacobs. As I said, check out her book, The Littler Museums of Paris. She's in the city right now, so if you're in Paris, you might be able to catch her. I think she's doing a book talk or two while she's in town. But look, I want to talk to you about, like I said, the bike tour that I did this week. So it's a new partnership I'm doing with Fat Tire Tours. You can go and check them out, fattiretours.com. I'm looking at their website right now. It's a new partnership that I'm doing here, so I'll just spell it out a little bit. The idea is every Thursday episode is sponsored by them. At the end of the episode, I'll talk about one of the tours that I did. And I'm looking at their website now. They do bicycle, Segway, walking tours in a lot of countries, in a lot of cities. I'll just read them out. Barcelona, Berlin, Chicago, Florence, London, Milan, Munich, New Orleans, Paris, Rome, and Washington, D.C. So in all of them, this discount code is going to work. Put in EARFUL, EARFUL, at the discount code on the very last page. That doesn't make any difference for me. If you do it, it's 10% off for you, and it'll let them know that this sponsorship is working. But I'm going to talk to you about the tour that I did, the nighttime tour. I'll tell you exactly what it's called via their website here. It's called the Paris Night Bike Tour. It's linked in the show notes from 44 euros as I see today. And I'm just going to give you a little review. Firstly, you should go check out my Instagram stories because it was pretty cool the way it happened, because it was one of those wild thunderstorms in Paris. And I'm talking absolutely berserk. And I was on the same rooftop terrace where I did the recent book chat with Cara Black. So if you've seen that video in the book club, we were up on that beautiful terrace in Montmartre that you should all go and check out anyway. And I was there with one of the biggest fans of this show, Lita, who I'm certain is listening right now. And the heavens opened up, and I looked at Lena, my wife, and I said, well, how are we going to do a bike tour in this kind of rain? But then, believe it or not, it all got really sunny really quickly, and we headed down to do the tour. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of an explanation of what you can expect if you do the same tour. It was really fun. So it's I'd say it's perfect for the kind of people that want to see a lot of Paris quite quickly. So I'll give you sort of the run-through of how it all works. You start off by the Eiffel Tower, and you cycle down through, I guess, the 7th hour on this one and into the Latin Quarter, which is pretty fun if you've never done it on a bike. If you're scared of riding bikes, you needn't be, because there's quite a big group and it's pretty safe and slow. Anyway, down through the Latin Quarter and over to the Notre Dame, past, you can imagine how many nice things are down there. So we're talking about the oldest church in Paris, the what's it called, the Saint-Germain-des-Prés. That church, went past that, went to the Notre Dame, which is still healing after the horrific fire a while back, and then over to the Ile Saint-Louis, and then back along the right bank where you jump on a cruise. And that was actually, I'll tell you what, that was one of the most fun bits for me because I've cycled in the city a fair bit, but I think I've only done the cruise maybe once. It's a really nice way to see the city, and you sort of get to know the people that are on the tour as well over a nice glass of wine or two. So, it was cool. We had a tour guide, Daniel, if you get him, guy with a British accent. He's, I assume he's British, lovely guy, and you've fallen in good hands there. But like in sort of review, I'd highly recommend it if you want to get a taste tester of some of the biggest and best parts of Paris from a bicycle. So go and check that out. It's called the Paris Night Bike Tour. It was pretty fun. Good photo opportunities, especially on the Ile Saint-Louis with the ice cream in your hand. But yeah, check it. If you want to get a taste, go on my Instagram stories. I put it up as a highlight, and you can check it out for yourself. As for me, I'm going to be doing a bunch of their tours. I'm looking forward to especially the Segway tour. I'm looking forward to the Segway tour because I've never done that in Paris before. And I'm going to do some of their big, like Versailles and Giverny, the Gardens of Monet. So that's what you can expect on Thursdays. Little stories, little tastes of Paris from my tours that I'm doing with them. Check them out on my Instagram stories or use that code, EARFUL, and you'll get 10% off. And I'm going to tell you all about them. So go and use that code, enjoy yourself on the bikes, drive safely, and let me know how you go. Coming up on the Eiffel Tower, I've recorded a bunch of episodes already that are going to be coming up with guests who I would wager that you guys haven't heard of before, but who are American and who are famous in France. So try and figure that out. I've got two, a man and a woman, both sort of about the same age. I'm not going to tell you who they are just yet. They're both about 60 years old. Both came here at the age of about 20 and made a serious life for themselves. And both of them get stopped on the street by French people. Both of them are quite famous in their own right. But both of them could probably walk down the streets of New York, LA, Sydney, and people wouldn't have an idea who they are. And they've got some good stories. So stay tuned for those episodes in the coming days and weeks. But as for me, I'm going to go and enjoy the sunshine because it hasn't been out for a while. So thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you on Monday.